So we're gonna be drafting a new book. In a way, this is kind of anniversarying the first ever video I did on this channel, my nano announcement video last year, where I talked all about the details of the book that I worked on last November. And this year, we are also doing a very similar video where we're gonna chat about the book that I'm gonna be tackling in November 2024. I'm currently working on a new adult fantasy book titled Unraveling, and the book that we're gonna be chatting about today is actually Unraveling's sequel, the second book in the Unraveling duology, which I'm hoping will be my debut release as a self-published author. So that's the context here. Now, I've been, talking casually about the fact that I was planning to draft this sequel in the month of November, but I thought it might be fun to just have a proper sit-down video where we talk about the sequel a little bit more, and I share some of the things I'm really excited about with drafting this book, some of the things that I'm expecting to be more challenging, things I'm trying out that are new with this project that I've never done before, and I just thought it might be fun to chat it up about this. Feel free to tell me about the book that you're going to be working on this November if you are doing any sort of drafting or writing challenge down in the comments. Even if you're not doing a challenge, feel free to let me know what you're working on. I'm always curious to hear. Before we get into this, I just want to address the elephant in the room. You may have heard that NaNoWriMo as an organization had quite a bit of controversy this past year, specifically regarding their statements on using AI to write books. I am not interested in getting into the weeds of that whole controversy. There are other videos on it if you want to go more in depth. I just want to make a very quick statement that I do not agree with the stance of NaNoWriMo as an organization. For me, Nano has never been about the organization. It's always been a writer-led community event. It's something I really enjoyed participating in last year and that I think is really beneficial for community, for writer motivation. I personally have felt as though I've been able to separate Nano as an event, as a community builder, as a challenge from Nano the organization. That is why I'm still choosing to participate and why you might still hear me mention the term Nano from time to time. I know not everyone feels that way. Regardless of what decision you choose to make going into November, what challenge you're participating in, what terms you're using, I just want to say I respect those decisions. I would love to see writers just kind of support each other during this time, regardless of what challenges you choose to participate in, if any, during this season. I will mostly be referring to this challenge as more just trying to draft a book in November, but you might hear me slip in Nano every once in a while. So I just wanted to make a disclaimer and not make it seem like I was ignoring the controversy, but truly I just want to focus on working on my book, and I want to focus on the camaraderie and the fun of this time in the author community, and I don't want to let the questionable actions of an organization take that away from me or take that away from the community that I've built. That's my perspective, but again, this is just how I personally feel. Feel free to do your research and make your own decisions. Now I'm hoping we can put that topic to rest and move on. So let's talk a little bit about this sequel. So this is going to be my first time writing a sequel. I've truly never gotten far enough with the project to explore a sequel, a series, none of the above. If you guys have been following my journey, you know that Unraveling is the first book I've ever drafted from beginning to end. So naturally, this will be my first full-fledged sequel, which is very exciting. I feel like it comes with its own perks and challenges. On the one hand, I get to kind of pull from and lean on so much of the world building and character work that I did with book one, so I'm not starting from scratch. But at the same time, there are so many threads and arcs and things that I need to stay on top of to make sure that book two is a satisfying evolution from book one. I need to make sure they're cohesive but still interesting as solo novels, so it's a very interesting challenge that I'm diving into, and I'm really excited about it. Hi, editing Brielle here. I realized I never really gave you details on what book one is about, or just general information about this duology, which feels crazy because how did I forget that in this video of all videos? I just kind of assumed that you already know about Unraveling, but the truth is that this video might very well be reaching people who have no idea who I am or about this duology. Unraveling is a new adult fantasy. It is a journey book. I describe it as having dystopian vibes and an enemies to lovers romance subplot. Originally, I was framing it as a romantasy. After working on this project, I truly think it's more so just a fantasy with a romance subplot. The romance is not that big of an aspect to be considered a romantasy in my opinion. To give you the synopsis, it's basically about a girl who grows up in a very oppressive, dystopian-esque society. She's very pessimistic, very jaded. She's forced to go on a date with the ruler's son, and in that date she mentions something about the wall, which is a supposed border of the continent that apparently has this different, better place with magic and all sorts of other stuff going on on the other side of it. She mentions the wall. To her, this is just a rumor, but it really piques the ruler's son's interest. Ultimately, they end up going to journey to the wall to see if the rumors are true and discover if there really is another place beyond it. And so it's a journey book, has those classic dystopian vibes, oppressive ruler, really strict society. So let's talk about some of the ways that this is going to differ from book one, because I think this is an interesting part of this project. So I'm playing with the idea of this book being dual POV. And as I'm filming this right now, I have not done my full outline, which I am planning to do at least a somewhat thorough outlining process, which of course I'll be documenting because that is unusual for me as a previous pantser or plancer, you could say. So I don't know for sure when I get into the weeds of it and plan that chapter by chapter outline how I'll feel about potentially using dual POV. That being said, I am interested in exploring it. It's something that I really think might be in this book, and it would be dual POV with my love interest. You guys know about Unraveling and about the Unraveling cinematic universe. Our love interest is named Varen. He's the ruler's son, and I'm obsessed with him. So I'm really excited about the possibility of diving into his head and getting to know him on such a more personal level. I already feel like I know him very well, and he's one of the most fascinating characters in this story to me. So I'm really excited about the possibility of diving into his perspective and getting to see how he views the world, how he views other characters in the book. I did write a flashback from Varen's perspective in book one because our FMC, Rhea, basically goes into his head and sees this flashback with him. So I got to play with that, but he was like 12 years old. It was different. I'm also really intrigued by the idea of writing a romance from dual POV. A lot of romances utilize dual POV, but I'm specifically interested to see how he views her and how I can use dual POV to really ramp up the romantic tension. That just sounds so fun to me. Which brings us to another way that I think book two will be pretty drastically different than book one, and that is just in terms of the amount of romance on the page and the progression of the romance arc, which is one of the things I'm most excited for with book two. Dare I say, actually, the thing I'm most excited for. So when I first started book one, I honestly thought that the romance was going to be more so on the page. Not on the page, but like I expected the romance arc to progress further. Like I thought we were going to get full romantic scenes. Like I thought the book was going to be spicier, to be honest. I thought the couple was going to get together by the end, basically. That's not the vibes. Slight spoilers, I guess, but it is the slowest of slow burns. It's an enemies to lovers arc, so I knew I didn't want to force it to get to a stage that it just hadn't earned or that didn't feel justified. This book isn't the longest thing in the world. It is going to get longer and longer as I continue to work on it, so it might end up being pretty hefty, but I don't know. I just didn't feel like there was enough time or enough space for our characters to really get there in book one. And anytime I did try to write scenes that were a little more blatantly romantic, I ended up cutting or drastically altering them because they just didn't feel right. In fact, she has more romantic moments with the side characters of this book than she does with our main male character. That being said, I do think there's a lot of great romantic tension and like the vibes are building, but it doesn't really materialize in this book. Book two, it will materialize, at least as I'm envisioning it. We're gonna see a lot more on the page romance, which I'm incredibly excited for because I've been waiting for that with these characters. I really do like them as a couple. They're very fascinating to me. They're very fun. And I personally feel like the tension is like boiling over at this point. So I'm very excited. I have some great ideas, in my opinion, for some scenes that I'm really excited to write between them. Another huge change is that book one was a journey book. So they spent a lot of time on the road. The locations were constantly switching up and we never really got to settle into any one place. Book two, while there's still going to be some location switch up, is much more grounded. There's like a home base, and that's really exciting to me to get to like sink my teeth deeper into that location, create like a homely feel because I really want found family to be a substantial part of book two as like a trope and a theme and whatever. So I'm really excited to be able to like sink into a setting. And book two also has an environment that's a little bit more, I don't want to say like our world, but in a way, book one very much has a dystopian environment and book two doesn't feel that way quite as much. There's gonna be coffee shops and birthday cakes and just like things that feel a little bit more cozy and homey and familiar, and I'm really excited about that. Another thing that I'm really excited about is that this book has a pretty big cast. Characters from book one get pulled back in. There's reunions happening, and when all is said and done, there's going to be a group of like 8 characters that are really kind of under the same roof and experiencing all of this together, and I'm so excited to play with that because book one, there was a small section where we had a little bit more of that like group feel, inner circle feel. Like I'm thinking of like ACOTAR, if you know ACOTAR. We had that for like a smidge of the book, but it's really just just in one section of the book, and by no coincidence, it is my favorite part. But most of the book were just with our three main characters, our main trio. And they're great. I love them and all, but there's just something that happens that's really magical when these other personalities are introduced, and we really get to see our main characters interact with a variety of different other people. Like, there's all this like history and like ties and trauma that ties all these characters together, and I'm just excited to work with that, to play with that. There's also characters that I loved in book one that I got to spend very little time with, and I'm very excited to continue exploring them and utilizing them in the second book. In terms of challenges, I mean, dual POV is obviously a challenge. Writing romance that's very much on the page for the first time is going to be a challenge. I still haven't quite figured out what my sweet spot is going to be in terms of how much I want to push that romance. This is, you know, a finale of a fantasy duology. The action scenes are going to be an undertaking. Book one and book two have their own mood and like their own vibe, and I do feel like they fit together well, but they are different in a lot of ways. And one of those ways is that book one is generally much quieter. There's not a lot of like spectacle. And book two, I do want to have that more like spectacle feeling, that grandness, those big moments. I really want to have that in book two. Book one is more just like moody, and it's truly just like, it's the angsty book. It's the book where our character is like, frick all this, like, I don't care. Book two, as her arc develops and as the stakes get higher and higher, things are just gonna change, and we're gonna get to see a different side of her. We're gonna get to really see her growth. I'm excited to see her actually start to like be a good person and like really care about people in the way that she has really not been in book one. That's her like overarching duology arc. So I'm excited to see that growth within Rhea. I think she's really gonna grow on me as a character. I already really like her, but she's a little bit insufferable in book one at multiple points. And I think with her growth, it's gonna be a proud moment to see her progress. I really hope that I'm able to craft that well. I am a little bit nervous about being able to give her arc that payoff in just 2 books, but I also am hopeful that it will be possible. I don't know, things just feel bigger and more dramatic in book two, but at the same time, I think they're gonna feel cozy. Book two takes place in winter. I haven't quite nailed down the very specific timeline, but book one, it happens in September. I'm playing with the possibility of a bit of a time jump, or at least time moving a little bit faster in book two. The entirety of book one happens in the course of the month, and I would love book two to span maybe like 6 months or something. Editing Brielle, jumping back in. Another thing that I'm really excited to explore further in book two is magic. There is a bit of magic introduced in book one. We start to get a tiny sense of how magic works. Our characters are just becoming familiar with their magical powers, I guess you could say. So it's like more so training, and there's going to be a lot more of that in book two, them training with their magic. They're also in a different location, and that really transforms how magic is viewed and used, and they get a completely different perspective from the sort of mentor that they had in book one. In book one, they're learning from this mentor, but he's never had magic, he's never used magic. Everything he's going off of is very theoretical. In book two, they're learning from people who have and use magic in their everyday lives, who have mastered specific skills within magic and like have different abilities. And so it's just going to give us a very different perspective on the magic system, and I'm really excited to play with that. How does magic differ in this new place than in the old place? See my characters come into their powers more, and also see some of the repercussions of the magic as well. That is all. Back to the main video. In terms of my goals with book two, I am vaguely aiming for the 50,000 words. Like, that's, you know, sort of the North Star. That's it would be awesome to hit it. That being said, if there's one thing I learned from doing this challenge last year, it's that my writing pace, 50,000 words, was not ultimately realistic. I think I ended up at 20 or 25K when all was said and done. Ultimately, I am someone who values quality, who values being proud of the work that I'm doing, and who doesn't want to make things more difficult for revising Brielle. So if I have to slow down at any point in this drafting process to outline some more, or brainstorm some more, if I need to fix something because I took a wrong turn and things have just gone off the rails, or even if I just need to work at a bit of a slower pace and 50K ends up not being realistic for me, I want to do my best to just like be proud of myself regardless of what word count I end up with at the end of November. My goal is truly just to start exploring book two. I have no crazy ambitions to even finish a full first draft of book two this year. I truly am just interested in starting to play with it and getting enough information about the sequel to help me when I go back into book one as well, because I think there's something to be said about the reciprocal relationship between a book and its sequel, because not only does book one need to inform the sequel, but I think the sequel needs to inform book one. And I feel really lucky to be at a point in my writing career where I don't have any need to push out book book one like tomorrow. Therefore, I can take my time and kind of work on the duology as a combined piece in a sense. I get the opportunity to sort of work on both books, have them both like in the fire, and let them inform each other, you know, let the decisions that I end up making with the plot of the sequel inform things that I'm maybe planting seeds for in book one and vice versa. So I'm excited to have something on the page for book two so that as I continue to revise book one, because I'm currently in draft 2 of book 1, I can take the things that I'm learning from the book 2 process and implement them in book 1. I'm also hoping that working on this sequel will give me a little bit of space from book 1 that will hopefully help me to come back stronger when I re-enter revising after November is over, because I am only planning to work on book 2 in November and then shelf it. But I'm also hoping that the skill and the practice that I get from drafting a new book in the month of November will help me to become just a stronger writer that's more capable of tackling revisions of book 1, that's more capable of writing strong prose. Honestly, like if there's one thing I've learned in the past few months, it is that nothing improves your writing like practice. Practice and then reading other work critically have been the two things that have transformed my writing. So I'm also really excited just to get some reps in with drafting that I think will really just benefit my writing skill. If this is the first video you're watching from me, definitely consider subscribing. I post writing content every single week. I do have a playlist of all the vlogs and videos that I made last year during Nano, so if you want to binge that, I'll link that down in the description. I'm very much looking forward to drafting vlogs. I'm going to be hopefully filming and posting a drafting vlog every single week for the month of November. I'm going to be doing a couple planning and plotting videos, at least one, maybe two, in the next couple weeks, so stay tuned for that for the rest of October. If you guys are curious what's going on with like my revising process, I am still trudging through revisions of draft 2 of Unraveling because I really want to get some like preptober focused content out and make sure that I'm documenting me prepping for the sequel. You're not going to see much in terms of like revising vlogs, probably until I pick the book back up in December. So from here on out, it'll probably be more so preptober and nano content. Shameless self-promo, if you want to give yourself a little accountability deadline for a project that you're drafting in November or any projects that you might be working on, I do offer manuscript critique services. Something that I did when I was drafting my first book was actually book a cover designer in advance so that I had like a firm deadline to work towards. So if you want to also do the same thing for yourself and you're looking to get some developmental feedback on your draft, definitely check out my manuscript critique services. It's kind of like a middle ground between a critique partner and a developmental editor at a much more affordable rate than what you would pay for a developmental editor. I give you in-depth notes on things like pacing, characterization, plot structure, storytelling, and more. And I do also offer a line level add-on where I'll comment on things like word choice, clunky sentences, etc. So if that's of interest, definitely check it out, briellejcruz.com. I'll have it linked down in the description, and feel free to email me with any questions you might have on those services. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you so much. Welcome to all the new people who have joined the channel recently. I'm so excited to have you, and I'll see you very soon with the first brainstorming video. Bye!